everybody. It's Matthew Mickey from Life Without the Rose Color podcast, like where we interview some of the most established individuals that can find and within their profession to see how they manage stress, adversity, and balance a healthy lifestyle, right? And we want to understand what outliers that happened in their lives while they were on their journey, and what gave them the drive to get to where they are now, right? And this podcast is brought to you by Dialect.app, which is pretty much the Google for options data, and it's managed by my good buddy Tony, who is a paralyzed Marine. I am Matthew Mickey, a retired disabled Army vet, and joining me today is, as a co-host, is Steve, a Navy vet, and my dear friend who's helping me learn economics, right? Steve, why don't you tell the audience a quick snapshot about your service and your transition into the civilian sector?
Okay, I did nuclear Navy right out of college. I'm a mechanical engineer, and then I transitioned into industry. I worked in the oil and gas industry for 37 years, reliability, maintenance, engineering, operations. So I've got a rich history of industry and working in big companies, traveled the world.
Yeah, so I am surrounded by nerds who are way smarter than I'll ever be, right? So this is going to be the podcast for people a lot smarter than me to listen to. So now the guy we brought in today, like I have a hell of a lot of respect for this guy. Like I have listened to hundreds of his videos that are free on YouTube, and like you can hear the emotional intelligence and the gentleness in his voice, which is what led me to asking him to do this interview. It has nothing to do with the cool stuff he did in the past, although he's done some really cool stuff. But you can tell based off of the cool stuff that he's done, he doesn't boast about it. He doesn't show ego. He's very, very helpful. He's empathetic and wise. Like he doesn't try to sell you anything, right? He legit is the Buddhist monk of Wall Street, I feel. All right. So I've learned a ton from his education regarding liquidity, price movement, price action. But what I've learned from this guy that I can translate into the civilian sector and into my personal life is how gentleness, empathy, calmness, thinking through stuff that is hard, leads to a better success in what you're trying to tackle, no matter if it's trying to learn how to trade better or learning how to, be a better college student and figuring out, calculus in the classroom. To like, how do we balance work, life, family, and ourselves, So today we have the honor in interviewing SARID HARPER from PIPNOTIC, and it's an honor to talk to you today. And I usually start this off with asking the guests to introduce themselves and tell me about their business. So the floor is yours, bud.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, you guys. It's a real pleasure to be here. I really have a lot of respect for the things that you do. Yes, so my name is SARID. I live in Indonesia, and I have a great passion for software engineering, and one of the most difficult things I think is to try and understand things that have a certain degree of randomness in them, whatever they may be. And I think that asset prices are a really beautiful field of study for this. And so this is what I've tried to do at PIPNOTIC, try to write software that can make sense of something that is seemingly very, very random and quite difficult to understand, which it is. And the task has turned out to dwarf a lot of my intellectual challenges previous in life. But it's okay. I've been doing it for almost 10 years, and I have some good products, but I'm not exactly where I want to be just yet. So the struggles continue. And that's all right.
I hear that, man. Like, I've seen your stuff, like from your videos and from being in your room. Like, you have single-handedly made it the easiest system to read, honestly, like when it comes to identifying pockets of liquidity and all that. And for the retail trader out there you got to realize, right? You've already real quick before we go into this, like I want you to go in your background and what got you into the finance markets. And I'll tell you, like for retail traders, 90% of the time is for the person who retail traders don't take this as a profession, right? And so they get blown out, but the ones who do take it as a profession, you truly have shown a easy way to identify, supply and demand, the liquidity that's in that price, where it lies and where it's going to respond to. So like with that being said, why don't you explain like some of your background to how you learned this? And then we'll go into the touchy, feely good stuff.
The good stuff. Yeah, so I mean, my background is really different. I mean, I started off studying medicine. I wanted to do orthopedic surgery, so I started studying that. But I think I was a little bit young, and so I wasn't maybe mature enough in my mind to take my studies seriously enough. And so I traveled to the Middle East, and I traveled in Israel and Jordan and Egypt, and that was a really cool time of my life. And then I ran out of money in Cairo, which is a really shitty place to not have money, especially if you have to live on the streets, which I did for about almost 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks. I went back to London, where I'm originally from, and worked there. And I met a very beautiful Danish woman who really floated my boat, and we decided to be together. And she moved to Denmark in '96, and I moved to Denmark shortly thereafter to be with her. So I started learning the language, and I needed some courses in order to continue my medical studies in Denmark. And one of the classes that I took in an attempt to learn Danish was computer science. And I was really intrigued by this computer business. I figured it was here to stay. And so I asked my computer science teacher what a computer virus was. I said, what is a computer virus? I don't get it. I get like, rabies or the flu or whatever, but I don't get a computer virus. And he said, stay after class today and we'll look at it in depth. And I was like, cool. And so class finished at about 2:00, and I stayed, and we stayed in the computer lab, and he wrote a Visual Basic worm, as it was referred to there, while I sat and watched. And he used it to kind of unmaliciously infect the rest of the computers in the computer lab via like a known vulnerability. And I was like, what the hell? I thought this is like unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. I said, man, this is so fascinating. I said, and so that was the day I decided to dump medicine and study computer science. And so I was pretty into kind of the offensive IT security stuff, like hacking and stuff. And the first about 5 years, I spent my time writing computer viruses and seeing and trying to understanding like concepts like polymorphism, which is really amazing, which is essentially where you have similar to normal viruses in living organisms, where you have something that has like malicious intent, and it can infect an organism, and via its infection of other organisms, it changes in appearance. And I thought that was really fascinating. So I studied how to replicate that in computers and computer viruses, and wrote like a really interesting polymorphic computer virus engine that would essentially cause computer viruses to change appearance every time they infected a new computer. And so if you were using maybe older software to attempt to find malicious software like this, it would fail because the initial signatures would be obsolete and non-applicable. And so I thought, wow, like I wonder if you can get a job doing this stuff. And it turns out that you can. And so I applied for a job and got a job kind of creating this offensive IT security unit in Copenhagen in Denmark. And that started my 20 odd year career doing offensive IT security. And so we hacked into companies they paid us to, and typically it was banks, pharmaceutical companies, governments, different like domestic and international government agencies, casinos, I mean, everything. People who made really big stuff, machinery that could fly or sail or drive via use of automation. They were very afraid of the prospect of having a visit by a very clever terrorist. And so we were hired to do all sorts of crazy stuff. And about 10-15 years into my career, I was asked to test a trading platform that was being used by probably one of the biggest banks in the world to buy and sell currencies and commodities and whatnot. This was an internal platform for their institutional traders. And I thought this was a really interesting project. And I got pretty amazed by how you could just buy euros with dollars and how you could buy gold, and kind of seeing the fluctuation in price and the data just flying over the network. And so I became very intrigued. And I built up a really good relationship with the head of infrastructure at this bank. And he could see that I was pretty keen on understanding what was going on. And so at lunchtimes, I used to go up to the trading floor, and it was amazing. It was like the 6th floor in this huge building in this in the city in Europe, and we would go up there, and it was just huge. Like, I mean, it went on this floor. It was absolutely enormous. You could probably fit 800 people in this just this floor. And so just watching all these guys running around in suits and screens, and I thought it was heaven. It was my new computer virus. And so I really got involved in that and really asked him to explain to me what went on. And so he introduced me a lot to some of their analysts, and these guys had theoretical physicists on the payroll. They had these gray-haired, gray-bearded mathematicians on the payroll, paying them staggering amounts of money to try and understand what asset prices were going to do. And so they were applying, I mean, machine learning and artificial intelligence, which at that stage was maybe pretty early on, but they were trying to apply these really mind-blowing theories like chaos theory and stuff. I remember one of these guys was working with in an attempt to understand and potentially predict future movements in asset prices. And so I thought, wow, this is so cool. And so I took a lot of the stuff that I learned, and I started writing software that would help me create my own unique understanding of what it was that these really clever people told me about. And so I narrowed it down to a few different things. And one of them was the distribution of liquidity. And this bank, they operated exclusively on the sell side. And so they sell stuff in an attempt to make asset prices go higher. They sell, the buy side buys, the asset prices go higher. And so I wanted to understand this. And so this was one of my primary takeaways. My second takeaway was that they would always talk about the strength of an economy or the strength of a commodity, and I didn't understand that. And so I would ask a lot of questions, and these guys would, most of them were quite friendly, and they would say, when you have to assess the health of an economy, because if an economy is healthy, it's going to attract investments, and the investments are typically going to be in the currency that country owns. And so I said, okay, that makes sense. And so if you have healthy economy, you have companies that are growing, this attracts foreign investments, maybe people are buying companies. So you have the concept of like a merger and acquisition occurring, where you have, for example, an American company buying an English company. They take their American dollars, they have to convert these American dollars to British pounds in order to purchase the British company from English people. They want to be paid in British pounds. And so that really piqued my interest. And so I started to write two kinds of software, something that focused on the distribution of liquidity and something that focused on the strengths of individual currencies or assets. And so this is what my software focuses on now: supply and demand and asset strength, or currency strength if you're focusing exclusively on currencies. Yeah, and so I started doing that in about 2012, I think, 2011 or 2012, and which is when I opened the doors at PIPNOTIC.
Yeah, and so I could just sit here and listen to you talk about this stuff all day, but that's not the purpose of this podcast, right? So the purpose of the podcast, right, is after the last 20 years in the infantry, like I've lost 12 soldiers to combat, and that's supposed to happen. Like, it's not supposed to happen, but like it's expected to happen with the nature of the beast, right? However, I lost 11 soldiers due to suicide, right? And those were 11 friends, those were 11 brothers, those were 11 sons, fathers, uncles. Like, the impact of that alone, like hit me especially hard, because, coming from a familyless background, like I grew up in the foster care system and all that, like the whole reason I joined the Army was the day after 9/11. I walked in the recruiter station. I said, I want to join, I want to serve, because the afternoon before that, like I watched thousands of people die in the Twin Towers, and all I could think about is the kids of their parents who died in that tower, those towers, are gonna have to
Yeah, it's
walk the
insanity.
hellish life I lived for the first 18 years of my life. You know, like going through the system. If nobody stood up in their family and took them under their roof, they're gonna have to go into the system, and that didn't settle right with me, and that's how I
Mm.
started the whole military career thing. And so I did a lot of research on the individuals that I personally knew that committed suicide, and I found a trend. And we won't go too far into that trend and why it happened and all that, but part of that stress that they were dealing with was the transition from the military into the civilian sector, right? And so the purpose of this podcast is to talk to established individuals like like who have lived, who have made it in our eyes. Like you've obviously made it, you're successful, you balance things out, you have experience, kind of like a mentor who has already accomplished what you've done. I mean, what you're trying to do, and they're kind of helping you by showing you what outliers that they had to experience and what competencies and attributes that persevering through the adversities that they had to persevere through to get to where they are. So that's the whole purpose of this podcast. So why don't you talk about some of the outliers that you had to experience, whether it's something that happened in your childhood that impacted you, or like something that like was a stress, right? And it doesn't have to be what you think society defines as stress, right? So what a college kid stresses about, a homeless person doesn't stress about. What a homeless person
Mm.
stresses about, I probably don't stress about. So like, what was a time in your life that you had to deal with a stressor, and what did you do to get through that?
Really good questions. Really good questions. I'm fortunate enough to have been raised by two loving parents, and I'm eternally grateful for that. That being said, um, there were some things that happened in my life that were perhaps non-traumatic, but at the same time forced me to create a strategy in my own way. And
Exactly,
I
like
was,
med school, probably, like like
yeah. Well, before that, I mean, I was really into boxing. I love boxing, and I boxed for
oh
quite a few
man,
years,
I
and I
love
and I was and I
boxing.
was really good at it. But my dad and my mum, they never ever came to any of my matches. There was zero support. I did boxing, which I loved. I excelled at. I did motocross, which I loved. I did running, like the 5 kilometer, which I was really good at. And I think during this, when you're a kid, either a son or a daughter, you're always seeking the approval of your parents. Uh, and I thought, while at the same time, I think this is natural, pretty early on in my youth, I decided to live as if my parents, rather more, I suppose, which is most importantly being a boy, as if my father was dead. And it's a really horrible thing to say, because I love my dad. He's an amazing man, but
Yeah,
I did not want to live my life dependent on my father's approval. I see how it affects people today, grown up
mhm,
people who cannot live normal lives because they're still seeking the
absolutely.
approval of their parents. This is crippling. And so if you're able to discover this at a very early age, I think you can save yourself a lot of heartache
Oh
and
yeah.
stress.
And I like that because, like, as a soldier or a veteran, like, like what you're talking about really hits home. Like, my daughter's 10, she's lived in 8 different states. I probably spent like 4 years with her in the whole 10 years because I was always deployed or always training and always doing
Yeah.
something, right? And so I had to learn to build that quality of life. I mean, I had to build quality time over, I had to realize that quality time was more important than quantity, right?
Sure.
So I knew I
Definitely.
wasn't ever going to be in her life consistently. So the time that I had to be there, I had to be there, like I had to be
Of
present.
course.
I had to value the time with her. So, like, there's a lot of soldiers that don't think that way, and they don't realize the impact of the quality time with their children, you know.
Mm.
So I definitely appreciate that insight, right? What about medical school? Like because like a lot of these soldiers will start off a career, like start off an academic, you know, lifestyle when they transition out using their GI Bill, which they're fortunate to have. But they're probably going to try to go off after that common goal of I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer. Why? Because they make money, you know, like, and then like they're going to learn the hard way to transition their career into something passionate. Can you talk more about like the decisions behind that and why and all that?
Sure. I mean, my studies in medicine were pretty short-lived, and this is because I realized that I was too young to begin studying to be a doctor. I was maybe 19. I mean, what 19-year-old knows what they want to do? I don't. You know. No. So you need to get out there. You need to get some life. At least this is from my perspective. For me, I felt that I needed some life experience before I could make any clear decisions. You know, I mean, I lived in England until I was 10. I lived in America from I was 10 till I was 19, and I lived in Denmark for 42 years, and now Indonesia for 3 years, and in Spain as well. And so, I mean, unless you expose yourself to things that you're not familiar with, you don't know what else is out there. And so living in the same place, I mean, you're very, very limited in your ability to make decisions. And so if you open your perspective, as soldiers do, I mean, they travel all over the place. They meet people all over the place who have crazy stories.
I tell everybody that just turns 18 or they just graduated college, I say, the best thing you can do for yourself when trying to find your next career is move out of your town, move out of your state, go experience something completely on your own, because there's some value in that. And just learning the flexibility of like, what's it like to be forced out of what I'm comfortable with, and learning how to build relationships in an environment where nobody knows me, you know, like there's a lot of impact on that, you know, and you learn empathy, right? Like I didn't realize the importance of respect and empathy until I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I had to learn that the people, the villages that I was going through, like they were normal people. They lived without the technology I was used to, and they lived in like a different environment that I was used to. But at the end of the day, there were people that deserved respect and empathy for their lifestyle. So once I taught my soldiers, like, listen, at 2:00 in the morning, we're going to hit every building in this village. But that doesn't mean we have to kick down the door. We don't have to destroy every building, and we don't have to like pound our chest because we're the big bad Americans. You know, like we will not do that. Like we will go in there respectfully. It'll be loud, it'll be violent, but once the area is cleared, you know, then the respect face needs to come on. We need to respect what they work hard for. If they're terrorists, if they're within our blacklist, then obviously we have to, if they're trying to shoot at us, then we have to take the right execution. But if they're not, and if they're compliant, we obviously have to be respectful. We don't have to be big bad Americans, you know? So I definitely appreciate that. But real quick, we're gonna break for a commercial break because my Zoom, you know, add-on doesn't seem to be working right now. So it says we're gonna run out of time. So let's go on and reset this, drop the commercial break, and like I'll send the new Zoom link out. All right?
Cool.
Thanks.
Stock market data navigation is costly and complex for the average person. Securing the right investments and trades is subjective and even more challenging with a series of popular digital tools to choose from, like scanners, indicators, websites, and social media. But what if there was a way to revolutionize how both amateur and expert traders can instantly access specific market data through the power of conversational AI? Dialect is your digital resolution for online investments and trades. Gather and analyze market data with just a few questions and clicks. Based on AutoQL translation technology, Dialect converts native speech into beneficial results.
Largest trades today.
Ask for the data you want, get the answers you need. Dialect's AI-enabled features allow you to request stock market data to receive accurate and informative responses. Efficiency is where Dialect thrives, maximizing the probability of your monetary success regardless of your experience level. Whether you want to ask, what are the largest trades today? Or what is the overall sentiment on a stock? Dialect delivers articulate performance with intuitive feedback based on real-time statistics, empowering you to make better data-driven decisions. By interpreting your native speech, Dialect also enables you to customize the application's dashboards and data alerts according to your preference. Prioritize your market concerns without information overload or interruption. Considering the benefits of financial freedom through investments or trades? Do it with Dialect. For more information, please visit www.dialect.app.
Perfect.
All right, so we're back. Sorry about that, guys. So man, like, I'll be honest with you, like, even at my stage of life, I'm 40 years old. I have a 10-year-old daughter, been married for 16 years, and I'm transitioning myself to Bank of America, which is cool. And life seems like the VIX is always at 30 or above, right? Especially when it comes to balancing myself, my hobbies, aka studying the financial markets. It's literally my only hobby right now. Work, family, self, bills, like friends, you know, like they're all pulling for a part of you, right? So how do you maintain your balance to not peak your anxiety levels and stress out? How do you decompress and keep a healthy mental status? What are some steps that you take?
I think that as human beings, this might sound a little bit weird, but our primary responsibility is ourselves. Because, and when I say ourselves, I say mental and physical health. Because if we are not physically and mentally healthy, then how on earth can we be a good father or a husband or a wife? It's so important, I think, that you invest most of your effort into maintaining a healthy body and maintaining a healthy mind. And for me, a healthy body means running 5Ks a day and doing some exercises. It has to be easy. If I had to spend an hour or 2 hours in the gym, I would never ever do it. I'm not that kind of guy that wants to sit in the gym all the time, but I do want to be healthy. So I run 5Ks, takes about 20 minutes. I do a ton of push-ups, sit-ups, curls, shoulder lifts, side planks, normal planks, squats, calf raises, jumping jacks, and a couple of other small
Sounds like
things.
you're
And
in the army, bud. Do you do it at 5 o'clock in the morning too?
So I try to get this stuff done, and you have to do it every single day. I cannot miss a day, because the day that you miss a day because of whatever reason, that's when the pig cracks. And I think that's really sad. And I have an amazing story to tell about my 15-year-old son. He saw me doing this maybe 3 years ago, and he said, "Dad, why do you do that stuff all the time?" And I told him, and I said, the bonus is that you can get like a really strong body, and the chicks will be digging you on the beach or at the pool, you know. And he's like, "Oh wow," you know, I got his attention. And so this kid, man, he's 15 years old. He's a normal teenager, but he never, ever misses a day ever. He hasn't missed a day in 2 years.
Wow,
when I
that's
arm wrestle him,
incredible,
I almost
man.
can't beat him anymore. I'm struggling to beat him. He's buff and
Yeah.
he's 15 years old. And now he can see, wow, man, I can see all the effort
That
that's
was
gone in.
leadership
It's
right
paying
there,
off.
just from your aspect as a dad, and you're teaching him discipline that he will never learn unless he joins the army. From a physical standpoint.
But he understands it now on such a fundamental level that I can return to this for anything. Hey, Dad, I want to learn how to play the guitar. How do I learn how to play the guitar? You have to put in hours, and you have to put in study. And I can refer back. Remember a little puny bicep 3 years ago? Look at it now. And he can look at it and he say, and he gets it. He's like, exactly. Now I know what it's about.
Yeah.
And now that is integrated into his body, and he can apply that to anything.
Wow,
It's
that's
beautiful.
awesome. Was he successful at the chicks checking him out on the beach?
He's a handsome beast. Looks like his mother.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, I definitely agree with you. Like, it's your job to take care of yourself, right? Because like me and Denise, like when we first had Lily, right? She was working her career, I was working my career. We were parents of a 3-year-old who was cute as ever, but she was loud, she was into everything. And like, we both became shell of people because we lost our identity in parenthood and our careers. Like, we didn't even know who we were. We were zombies, right? What are some things that you do for yourself outside of physical fitness and like that you do to kind of decompress your mind and to maintain, you know, your identity as a person and not just as a father or a husband or, you know, the CEO of PIPNOTIC?
Actually, we don't have a CEO, only the CTO.
Oh, okay.
So I do visualizations at night before bed and in the morning if I manage to get up before my youngest, and I just envision myself. Most importantly, I try to experience the emotion of being the person who I really want to do, and this keeps me in a positive mental mindset, and I just try to carry that feeling with me throughout the day. Also, another thing that I think is super important is if you're a reactive person, or if you're someone who initiates your own behavior, because being reactive often results in you doing things that you would not otherwise do. And so knowing when you're in a situation and you're being triggered by something, trying to be aware of the triggers so that you can, oh, I don't want to react, I want to act, and just choosing that. It's really difficult. And I had this conversation with my brother 2 days ago regarding children and how your kids can like, man, drive you up the wall, and or your wife or a friend or a colleague
Better
or whatever.
anybody you know.
Honestly, man. And so this is the perfect opportunity for learning. And so experiencing every trial, every heated conversation, every conflict as an experiment. Okay, wow, I have an experiment here. Okay, how can I try to get the best data from this experiment? And so being mindful of, you always have a choice. You can react or you can act in accordance to how you are as an individual. That individual, may it be the one that you visualize yourself in the morning and the evening, or just someone who you aspire to be from a general perspective. Maybe you have a mentor, or you have a brother or a friend, or your father or your son, or someone whose attributes and values you're trying to model. Just always trying to keep that person in the forefront of your consciousness, so
Wow,
that you can always bring that to you.
That's amazing, man. Like, I love hearing that, because I just had a conversation with one of our friends the other day, and she's the most uplifting person ever. And she's always happy. You know, those people that are always happy, it's so annoying that they're so
Golden.
happy. Well, I asked her, we were drinking coffee, the family and her family was drinking coffee with us the other morning. And I was like, why are you so happy? Like, how do you do that? Like I am not that happy of a person. I wish I was. And she said, you know, Mickey, it's a choice that I have to make every single day to be grateful that I'm alive. And I'm like, why do you say that? And she's like, well, I survived breast cancer and some other cancer. And I never knew that about her. Like, you would never know that about her. You just knew her as the person that she wanted to be around because she was so positive, you know? And, you know, like, she's like, you should be the same way, Mickey. She's like, you survived. You've got
the unsurvivable.
Yeah. She's like, you survived a car wreck. You've got 8 concussions, like 6 of them from IEDs and like roadside bombs. And she's like, you should be dead in more situations than normal people are, and you're still alive. And I was like, that really puts stuff into perspective. And then to hit that up, like, I used to have a real bad anger issue with driving and road rage. And, you know, my wife like looked over at me one time and she's like, you need to unlock your uncrazy side, because that person who cut you off just now, it's not personal. They don't know you. They would have done that if it was somebody else. So why are you letting it impact you? And that really hit me hard. And I started collecting data, just like you said, without realizing it. And I learned I'm not allowed to listen to Metallica and drive in New York City, because that's my trigger for road rage.
Well, you're mad all day if that guy cut you off, and he's forgotten about it the second you're in the rearview mirror.
He doesn't even know who you are. Yeah, he's gone.
Absolutely. Care less. Right. So in the Army, like, it is really important for the leader to conduct talent management on themselves, you know, but then more important for them to conduct talent management on their soldiers, right? Understand in detail their attributes and competencies, like, that's key, right? Because to understand what they're strong and what they're weak at, you can understand how to lead them, how to develop them, how to mentor them. And in return, you can apply their strengths and weaknesses across the battlefield and pair them with soldiers who are strong where they are weak, right?
Sure.
I've never seen this in the civilian sector, right? And like, what is that like when you don't, like when you manage your own company, or like first and foremost, before I do that, like what are your what are your thoughts on like identifying talent management within your kids, within your wife, within yourself, and within people that you mentor?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think first, just to go back to a point that you said about the road rage, I think that another thing that I adhere to very religiously is live as if your father was dead. And next one is never take anything personally, because yeah, the guy in the car, he doesn't know who you are. He wouldn't even know if you met him and you confronted him in the supermarket, he would have no idea who you are. Take nothing personally. And so when someone has an outburst at you or someone cuts you off, you have to think, okay, maybe that guy got a call from his wife and their kid had just had a crash and he was racing to get his ass home as quick as possible. You never know anyone's circumstances. Your friend, she had survived multiple kinds of cancer. You didn't know that affected who she was. This applies for everybody. Everybody has a life. They have shit going on with them that's affecting them positively and most often more negatively. Everybody is living life, and everyone has baggage. Everyone has stuff going on, and we just have to be mindful of that. Everybody, and like everybody.
And that's really, like, I learned a lot from my wife, honestly. Like, and that's why we'll get together, right? Her dad was unfaithful to her mother when she was growing up, and I was like, did you forgive him? Like in the beginning of the relationship, when you get to know each other outside of like, hey, I see your flesh, you're cute, you know. Once you're past that, like, your hot phase, like, you start getting to know each other more intimate, right? And we were talking about that, and I asked her, I was like, did you forgive him? Like, you seem all right with him. And she was like, yeah, because, you know, like, I understand that no matter what my mother did, it wouldn't have mattered. Him cheating on my mom was his own brokenness. It's not personal. And I was like, wow, that's a whole nother level of wisdom. And she's like, yeah, like, if I cheated on you, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with my own lust and my own brokenness. You know, like, I might find an excuse why I did it, that you might be deployed every other year or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's my own brokenness. And to kind of hit on act like your father's dead, like, there's a certain luxury that you get when someone passes, in the sense of you get to see them from a standpoint you never thought you could see them, right? So I usually give this comparison with people, you know, once, depending on the level of grief that they're in when they just lost somebody. But like, if you're a son and you had a resentment list towards your father, right? Because he might have worked too much when you were a kid, or he didn't attend your stuff, or he was just angry when he came home, he'd yell at you or whatever. Like, you have to, once they pass, you can really, and once you're a father yourself, you can really put yourself in their shoes and start to see the why, right? You can start to analyze the why. Why did my dad miss half of my appointments, or like half of my, you know, in your case, your boxing competitions? Well, maybe he was working and he worked an 18-hour job just to provide you guys a good life. Or why did he come home and just get snappy with me every time? Like, he might have just been exhausted. And a lot of people don't realize that resentment list and the cause of that resentment list that they have towards a person until that person's, you know, passed. And that's sad. But like, I encourage everybody, like, if you have resentment towards anybody, number one, figure out where that's coming from yourself. And number two, you know, like, think about the why. Why do you think they're that way? And then talk about it with them. You know, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I said, you can't take stuff personally. You know, yeah, I mean, stuff happens to people. You can't run around being like oversensitive about stuff. People have stuff going on. You have to just live your life, you know? And so I don't take things personally. If a guy cuts me off, I mean, driving around in Bali, man, no, it's very different. I mean, if I wanted to experience road rage, I would have gray hair and I would be crazy, because the Balinese drive very, very differently than they do in the US, in England, in Denmark, or Europe, or whatever. The traffic just moves. You're going down the road, there's a motorbike on both sides and a car on both sides coming at you. On my side of the road, there are dogs, there are chickens, there are people with selling like meatballs and wagons. It is absolutely mental. And so you have to say, all right, one thing I can do is I can slow down. And so whatever you meet, whatever high frequency madness you meet, you can be like kind of the antithesis to it. And then you can kind of marry in that way, because if you meet kind of madness or anger with madness and anger, I mean, there's only going to be more, you know, there's 2 times the madness and the anger. But if you meet as the counterpart, as the antithesis, then it kind of cancels that out. And so in situations where
about that slow down, right?
Yeah, just
you
slow
can get
down.
mad one time about the first time you interact with something, but if it's something that you can project that's going to be repetitive, like driving in, you know, crazy town, like there's no excuse. Like you have to add time to your trip, you know, so you can project
Sure.
what kind of craziness you're going to get, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And so just slowing down. Also speaking, if you want to be a clear a communicator, one of the best ways to do it is to just slow down your rate of communication to the point that your mind, your brain, your cognitive ability can follow along. I used to speak really quickly, and I found myself like that, and I said, what's going on? I was like, okay, my mind's going 1,000 k's an hour and my mouth is following along at 144. Doesn't work. So either just got to slow stuff down in
Definitely.
your
I'm
head.
in a house full of women, so like they all speak really fast, and I'm trying to keep up with them. Like, I don't even know what you just said 2 seconds ago. And then like, I think the big thing to get out of this is like, you know, you see people for brokenness because we all have it in baggage. You have empathy on it, but you also have to learn to set healthy boundaries, you know, like,
Sure.
what are your thoughts on that?
This is a really important thing that you just said. My wife she's a kind of person who she's really empathetic, and she attracts people into her life who just like dump on her. And she went to this women's dinner like a few weeks ago, and there was a big group of women around the table. You know, a lot of people, foreigners who come to Bali, they live and they meet up and stuff. It's kind of like part of their social activities. So she was there, and there was this woman who stood up, and she didn't really know anybody there. She stood up and she started sharing about how she was sexually abused when she was a child. And my wife was like, whoa. She didn't say anything. She came home and she told me that. She's like, this is way too much information. And it's quite, of course, this woman has this horrible experience when she was a child, but it doesn't mean that you can just dump it on people, because this is stuff that people can take with them. This is terrible. Yeah. And so she said, whoa, she'll never go back to this place again because of the things that this woman shared. Next, you know, it's going to be like a horrible piece of information being dumped during each one of these meals. It's terrible. So as a human being, you also have to be quite conscious and respectful of the information, the traumatic, the negative information that you share with other people, because it can be really difficult when someone says something, you know, to a sensitive person. That sensitive person just says like, man, that just ruined my day or my week. You never know how the recipient is.
You know, like that's like soldiers, for example. Like nobody needs to know what like I remember telling my wife, she'd call me like whenever we did get to talk to each other, and she'd be like, is everything okay over there? Like I was like, sure, like if you added water, it'd be a beach over here in Iraq, you know, but like she doesn't need to know what happens over there and all that. Like, and if I felt comfortable telling her about that, then that would be a certain time and place, you know, and there's certain things that there's certain steps that I need to do to be comfortable to talk about that, but it's not something that is for everybody, like in certain scenarios, you know.
But maybe you would be sharing like the intense stuff with her while you were there, so that you could comfort her on the telephone. That'd be the worst situation. Yeah, you know, they're dropping bombs and people are dying. See you later. You know, like she's on the other end freaking.
Exactly. That's a horrible idea. But anyway, hey, we've hit our time limit, guys. So thank you for joining us, and I got mad respect for you. And like, if you guys, even if you're not into financial, you know, literacy and how like price moves and all that, just go in there and listen to his calm, gentle voice, like his meditation. I swear,